Hello, my name is Eric Woodcock and I want to teach as many people as possible about project management. I spent several decades working on and leading projects in the automotive, aerospace and IT industries, as well as in public authorities in the United Kingdom and around the world. More recently, I have been teaching courses in project management at leading British universities. Now I want to share what knowledge I have more widely, which is why I'm planning to put together a series of programs about different aspects of projects, which I think could be of value to students and newcomers working in the field of projects. So what this is a prototype, a first effort to try out what one of those programs might look like. And I'd be really interested in getting your reaction to it. First, to see whether you agree that it's got potential, it's a good idea, and if you do, then what your thoughts are about how I might optimize the format and style of the presentation. So thank you very much. I hope you enjoy the next 40 minutes and find it useful. In this first program, we're going to look at why it's so important for any project to fit in with the direction that the organisation wanting the project is trying to follow. We shall look at how organisations set that direction and the part that projects play. We shall also start to look at what a project really is. Now, the first thing to say is that projects are not just about business. If you look at a lot of textbooks, training courses and other material about projects, they tend to view projects through the lens of business. But in truth, projects are used by all sorts of organisations, as this selection shows. Big state-owned enterprises will undertake projects. Research bodies have projects exploring areas like new antibiotics. Governments need to take a project view from time to time when they are introducing major initiatives like rolling out a new tax system. When you think about the work of creating a play or a film or a musical show, you realise they're all really projects. When it comes to education, designing and running a course is a project. Health services might run vaccination schemes or set up campaigns to persuade people to behave in more healthy ways. We have intergovernment agencies like the United Nations who do a lot of work in countries around the world where a project approach is necessary. Activists groups like environmental campaigners use project techniques in their endeavours. This is not a complete list. There are lots of other facets of modern life where projects actually take place. So we need to be careful that we don't just focus on projects in business. The other thing to say is that more and more organisations of all kinds are being judged on how well they do projects. So a company might see its share price fall significantly if it messes up a big project. A government might even lose power because it failed to roll out that new tax system successfully. The next thing to say is that we live in a world of increasing change. Yes, that's a terrible cliche we hear all the time, but it is true. To illustrate the point, here we have a picture of a woman in the United States using a Bell 500 telephone handset introduced in 1950, which lasted in production until 1984. The only major revision was offering push buttons instead of a dialer in 1963. By contrast, on the right-hand side, we can see a couple using a Samsung Galaxy smartphone. Since this phone was launched on the market in 2009, it has seen improvements, upgrades and range extensions occurring practically every month. This may be an extreme case, but is it far from unique? So why are organisations under so much pressure to change what they do and how they do it? Here are a few reasons. Customers and citizens are becoming more demanding. They won't settle for poor performance and bad quality. Competition is coming from new countries with new ideas and often lower costs. Narrow product launch windows are defined periods within the calendar when a new product must be introduced or it will fail to sell. In the video gaming world, for example, the Electronic Entertainment Expo in Los Angeles in June is a key event. Political upheavals are new experiences for many in the established Western economies. In some countries, new government policies favour local goods, which means organisations have to adapt how they operate. New market opportunities might mean entering new territories. Africa is developing very fast. But it can also mean expanding what we already do. Builders of trains realised some time ago that rather than just sell a fleet of trains to a customer, there was a lot of money to be made out of providing services to maintain, repair and even clean those trains once they had entered service. In every field, physical products are becoming more and more complex and more technically dense. Compare an ordinary car built today with one made 20 years ago. The older car would not have sat-nav, an intelligent braking system, multiple airbags, an advanced engine management system, and a host of other features. A disruptive technology is an innovation that comes along and renders obsolete much of what was there before. In the 1970s, the Boeing 747 jumbo jet was a disruptive technology. It completely changed the leisure travel market and enabled millions of ordinary people to fly around the world. Airlines had to change, airports had to change, travel agencies had to change. Citizens and regulators are imposing higher and higher environmental standards that need projects to comply with them. Cities are introducing low pollution zones, which mean vehicle manufacturers have to build cars and trucks with cleaner engines or shift to electric drive. Outsourcing, offshoring and reshoring, what are they? Outsourcing is where an organisation decides to split off some of its activities to concentrate on what it thinks it does best. Functions like human resources and certain aspects of manufacturing may be contracted out to another firm. Offshoring is about moving operations somewhere where costs are lower, but supply chains are good. Apple designs its products in California and offshores manufacture to China and elsewhere. Some organisations have found they lose control of quality with offshoring, and the long supply chains make it harder to be responsive to sudden changes in their markets. So they have chosen to reshore some or all of their work back to their home country. In the midst of all this change, an organisation needs to define the direction it wants to go in. It needs to define its vision. A vision is a way of explaining in simple terms the organisation's core purpose, ideally taking advantage of change rather than becoming a victim of it. We've got 3 examples here to have a look at. Here is the first one. Provide access to the world's information in one click. A company set itself up, and that was its vision. The name of that company is probably quite easy to guess: Google. A world where the rights of every child are realised. This is not a company this time. It's actually the United Nations Children's Fund, UNICEF. The last one we are going to have is to become the world's most loved, most flown and most profitable airline. That is the vision of Southwest Airlines in the United States. It is important to say that these visions have stayed pretty much the same for long periods of time. The Southwest one, for example, I checked on its 2007 website, and it was the same vision then as it is today. So a good vision has durability. It is going to be around for a long time, and the organization is going to be able to organize itself to drive towards that vision. Now, there are a couple of things to say about a vision. The first thing is that a vision is more descriptive than precise. So visions are not generally full of numbers and specifics. It's more about crystallizing an idea about what the organization wants to be. The best ones, like our examples, are pretty short and easy to remember. The vision is at the top of a pyramid when it comes to thinking about where the organization is going. The next step will be to come up with something that's a bit more concrete, which is the mission. The mission defines what our goals are. So we can be specific about where we want to be within the short to medium term. If we look again at Southwest Airlines, its mission is dedication to the highest quality of customer service, delivered with a sense of warmth, friendliness, individual pride, and company spirit. We can unpick that and realize there are quite a few goals hidden in there. The highest quality of customer service means that they will strive to be number one for customer service at any time. That is clearly their aim. We need to drill down a bit more to understand what exactly customer service means, and that will evolve over time as customers' expectations and preferences evolve. That will translate into specific objectives, like setting up the routes customers want, making it easy to buy and change tickets, and having staff highly proficient in particular skills. The idea is that if we clarify these goals, we can then define the outcome we are looking for. What this future state, the outcome, actually consists of may not be the ultimate manifestation of the vision, but in the period that we can look ahead, maybe 3 years, maybe 5 years, we can be pretty clear about where we want to be. It is the desired state of the organization that delivers the mission. We probably need to change the organization, what it is, what it does, what it sells, how it's organized, how it operates, and so on. So it's in line with the mission. Dropping down to the next level, we come to strategy, which says how we are going to achieve these goals and therefore reach the outcome. There may be lots of different ways to do that. We can possibly do it ourselves. We can get consultants or experts in to help us. We can form a partnership. We can do all sorts of things. So the strategy is about working out in a reasonable level of detail how we are going to achieve our goals. We go through a logical process to do that. First, we analyse the situation where we are. This clarifies the gap between where we are and where we want to be. We then examine different alternatives to how we could achieve our mission, crossing that gap. We select the implementation approach we think is the best one to take, and that will generally lead us to identifying one or more projects. Vision, mission, and strategy development will be driven by the senior team in the organization, not by the project manager or the project team. But this explanation helps to show where projects have to fit in, not as exercises done for their own sake, but because they support the strategy. There can be rare exceptions, but if a project does not support the strategy, if it does not make sense in terms of the mission and the vision, it should not go ahead. Each project will create an output for the organization. That could be a physical output, like a piece of machinery or a building, or it could be a more human-centered output, like a reorganization or a marketing campaign. Whatever it is designed to help create the outcome. So if the management process has been properly designed, our projects are producing outputs that help to deliver the outcome. We measure our success in delivering the outcome using benefits. A benefit is a way of measuring some aspect of to what extent we have achieved the outcome. If we make our plans and we do our project and create the output, we will be able to judge how effective we've been by seeing how well we've achieved the benefits that we have defined in those plans as the ones that we need to deliver. There are various types of benefits. There are easy to measure benefits and hard to measure benefits. There are short-term benefits and long-term benefits. Some benefits are apparent quite quickly. Sometimes it takes much longer for it to become apparent whether some benefits have been achieved. If we were, for example, doing a project in a manufacturing company, creating a new product, then the output will be the product we are putting into the market, and the outcome will be perhaps making that organisation the market leader in its field. We have to measure how well we have achieved the benefits we defined in the plans. The organisation might have set a goal for a particular level of market share for the new product, and we can measure whether we have achieved that. If we were redesigning our factories to make this product, we might have a productivity goal and then measure the number of units made per hour. Often, benefits are expressed as targets. We might have a target of getting our new product into a particular online retailer and measure our success at it. It could be that we've had a previous generation of products that have been dogged by lots of failures. We could set reliability targets for the fault levels in a new product and measure whether it met them. Those are fairly easy benefits to design and measure. There are other very important benefits which are harder to measure, even though the organisation may insist that they must be included. How do we measure customer acceptance? How do we measure improved levels of customer service? How do we measure what our own organisation is learning from the project? How do we assess the effect of the project on the organisation's reputation? The answer is that in most cases we would have to do surveys of different kinds, where we would actually talk to people, getting their opinions and trying to use the results as a way to determine whether we had actually delivered the benefits that we said we would. And we would agree with the organisation beforehand how we would do that. The terms short-term and long-term are a bit fluid. Short-term in the smartphone industry might be 3 or 4 months, and long-term might be 18 months, whereas in the civil aircraft industry, short-term might be 5 years, and long-term 15 years. So if a government rolled out new health guidelines, it would take several years before we could confidently measure whether they had a beneficial effect, whether targets for reductions in certain kinds of disease had been achieved. There is a limit to what we can do in terms of defining benefits. We can have a long list of goals and we can determine the benefits that we have to achieve in order to meet the outcome we have set ourselves, but that doesn't come for free. We have to decide to what extent we are prepared to take on risks and costs in order to deliver benefits. Typically, if we try and save money and reduce the risks to a minimum, then the chances of getting big benefits will be smaller. Whereas, if we carefully undertake and manage a more risky project and spend more money, there is the potential of gaining more benefits. For instance, if we are building a road bridge across a river, it would be cheaper and less risky to build a 2-lane bridge, but we wouldn't get the same benefits in terms of vehicle capacity, local economic growth, reduced pollution from queuing traffic and so on, as we would get with a 4-lane or even a 6-lane bridge across the same river, even though it would be more risky and more expensive. Before we go on, of course, there is a need for a note of caution, because it's not automatic that our outputs will help us achieve our desired outcome. Failure of the project we have identified we have to do could actually destroy the organisation. There have been lots of projects based on this process that have come out of strategy development where the project has been misguided over costs, badly managed, and so on, to the extent that the outcome was never going to be achieved, and in the extreme, the whole organisation collapsed. We have spoken casually about projects up to now because we all have a general idea about what a project is. It's an innovative exercise to get people working together to create something new. But it is useful to have some sort of definition. Now, as with so much in the field of project management, there isn't really a single agreed definition of what a project is. Some are very short and quite superficial, some are tortuously long. I have tried to pitch my definition somewhere in the middle. A project is a temporary endeavour to create a specific output for a customer using defined and organised resources in a controlled manner within a defined time period and budget. Temporary. The idea is that the project team creates the output and then is stood down, and the work is passed over to the people who are going to be using that output. I use the word endeavour because endeavour implies a degree of uncertainty as to whether or not this is actually going to work. There is no guarantee that any particular project is going to succeed because we are trying to do new things, and those new things may not work out. So you have this idea that we're on an adventure. Specific output. We have to be as clear as we can about what we are expected to produce, whether that is a physical object, process, organisational change, or all sorts of different things. Customer. The project manager, the project team must recognise a specific individual for whom they are producing the output. That is usually a senior person in the organisation calling for the project to be done. It is not the end users of the output. If we were in a situation where there was a project to create a new IT system for a sales department in an organisation, then the customer might very well be the sales director. We would be delivering the output of the project to the sales director. So we have that mental idea of customer and supplier, and that applies whether or not the project is done by internal people or whether we get somebody else in to do it. The supplier is the team that produces the output for a customer who has specified what they want. Using defined and organised resources. Resources, the inputs to the project, include people, equipment, office space, rents, software licenses, etc., plus of course money. In specifying our outputs, we can define what resources, what inputs we shall need to create that output. We need to be able to organise those resources so that they are ready at the right times to get involved or be used. Controlled manner. There has to be strong control of the way that the project work is being conducted within a defined time period and budget, aiming to keep to the plan, but able to deal effectively with problems and changes. As we've said, a project is a temporary endeavour. It is not going to go on forever. So we need to define when we expect the output to be complete, and we need to define what we think is a fair and realistic budget to pay for creating the output, based on the specification of the output and the resources we are going to use. There are lots of different ways to actually try and produce an output. You can get a bunch of people together in a room, give them some rough plans and tell them to get on with it. However, general experience shows that doing things on a project basis in terms of this definition, is the most effective way of achieving successful change. Let us just recap the basic logic of the project. We have our current state, which we are unsatisfied with. We are experiencing, or we can see change that we need to react to. We have our desired state, the outcome that we want to get to, that actually deals with that change. And probably beyond that, we have got achievement of the vision, as this is a step along the way. We have got a clear mission and goals that we need to meet to get to the outcome. So we have got a gap that the project will help to close. We work out the benefits that we should be able to measure to prove the project output is supporting the outcome the customer wants. We analyse how these benefits can be achieved. We can develop a project that will be able to achieve those benefits and put the project together in order to deliver them. Then we carry out the project. We create the output. And as we are creating the output, we are keeping an eye on the outcome as we go along, making sure we are not losing sight of that. And we are also checking that we are likely to deliver the benefits as we work through the project. As we get towards the end, we have the process of transition that takes the output out of the project team's hands and into everyday use with the end users. And those benefits need to be embedded within the organization. Projects can come from many directions. A lot of projects start at the senior level within organizations, setting the organization in a certain direction, so projects are aligned with its mission. We may have some ongoing policy that we are basically rolling out. We could be a hotel company that is building an estate of hotels, so each project is part of that ongoing policy. We might have done some research which has produced interesting results, and off the back of that we may decide to do some kind of project to scale up. A famous example, of course, is at the 3M company, where Art Fry and colleagues found a use for a not particularly sticky adhesive, which they fooled around with and got some money to work on, and eventually produced a post-it note. Then we have ad hoc innovation, with people coming up with random ideas. Certain companies encourage this. Google, for example, allows its people to spend a proportion of their time just working on stuff, and once in a while someone will come up with the next Google Maps. There may be external pressure on the organisation, maybe from the government bringing in new data protection rules, where we have to conduct a project to obey those rules. There can be different types of projects, such as new product development and market entry, or even a brand extension. Process innovation. We're looking a lot now at things like additive manufacturing. Sometimes a joint venture is put together to do some sort of ambitious project like building a large tunnel. We can see from the coloured discs where these various projects might originate from within an organisation. From the bottom, there are another few examples. Policy implementation may come from external pressure, or maybe our own policy that we are pushing through. Service campaign. We might have introduced, say, a domestic appliance where we've encountered some problems with motors wearing out too quickly that need to be sorted out. So we have what's called a service campaign project to carry this out. An acquisition, going out and buying another organisation, is very much a project led from the executive level. Then we might find ourselves dealing with a natural disaster where clearly the pressure is external, but there is also room for a great deal of ad hoc innovation. Projects can be of different types. In some projects, we are using familiar methods to do a familiar job. For a construction company, this might be laying a stretch of road across an area of easy terrain. Sometimes we need to use familiar methods, but in an unfamiliar setting. An organisation used to running schools might be given the job of setting up a new school system in a distant country. We might have to use unfamiliar methods in a familiar setting. A government might determine that aspects of healthcare must be privatised. The services to patients remain the same, but setting up how they will be managed and delivered involves a new approach. And ultimately, we may find ourselves having to use unfamiliar methods in an unfamiliar setting. An organisation may find itself having to find ways to work with other outfits around the world to jointly develop a cybersecurity system based on new artificial intelligence technology. Projects come in all shapes and sizes. We can apply all these principles to a project, whether it involves just one person with a £100 budget or a project with 10,000 people and a £10 billion budget. We can have a deadline very soon, or we can have a deadline decades away, say for the decommissioning of a nuclear power station. We might have crystal clear goals. We are very clear about what the project output is meant to be. But sometimes there will be projects where goals are deliberately a bit fuzzy. Research and development projects, for example. Then we have projects which are cerebral in character, like IT development. We might have a project that is much more physical in character, a project building a huge wind turbine farm, perhaps. There might just be one end user, the owner of a specially designed house, or there could be millions, like all the owners of a popular car. The essential point is that we are talking about achieving change in a controlled and predictable way, working out how we are going to cross that gap we discussed earlier. An organisation typically has what are called operations, which are routine, repetitive activities which the organisation does. So, a city council will be doing things like running libraries, organising refuse collection, and providing social services. What are the differences between operations and projects? Operations generally go on and on and on. Projects are much more unique in character. The word unique is used a lot around projects. Some people suggest that every project has to be 100% unique. In fact, we want a project to be as minimally unique as it possibly can be. Why would we want to reinvent the wheel? But there will inevitably be aspects of it which are a bit different to other projects. We have ongoing performance targets around collecting the rubbish and so on, and change in operations tends to be evolutionary. What we are looking at in a project is very clear, very singular goals and achieving revolutionary change, because where we are at the moment is not acceptable. The management of operations is clear and resources tend to be around for a long time, whereas in projects sometimes the project management structure can be a bit fuzzy. People need to know what they are doing at team and sub-team level. But because it is sometimes a dynamic situation, we can find that the project structure is changing quite a lot as the project moves along. We don't normally have one team of the same people at the start of the project who stay all the way through to the finish. People come and go, they are transient. Indeed, even the project manager may change a number of times. When we are running operations, we are focusing on efficiency. We are trying to do the rubbish collection 2% more efficiently next year than we did this year. We might train drivers to save fuel and make the collection routes less complex. With projects, however, we are focusing on effectiveness. We are focusing on creating the change, the outcome, the benefits that we signed up to deliver. There is a fairly obvious relationship between projects and operations, however. Think about a new venture, a couple of people working in a garage with a great new idea. They are going to have a project to develop their product and projects to design the processes that will make that product, sell that product, or whatever. They create a set of operations which produce and distribute the product. Everything goes along sweetly until they reach a point where either internal or external forces require change. Maybe the product isn't as popular anymore, or the processes can be much improved. So they might run some more projects to improve the product or revise the operations. They will carry on and keep an eye on what's happening until change is needed again. They can go through this cycle a number of times, but then they might reach a point where they decide that the operation has had its day because it has done what it had to do, is not viable, or does not need to exist anymore. So they run a project to wind it up. We have spent quite a long time talking about what projects are, and we should be talking about various aspects of projects as we move forward. One key thing I would like to close this program with is how important it is to take a different approach to projects than we would take to operations or other kinds of work. There are 4 aspects of this. The first is that we need to think project. We have to focus on the inputs that we are putting into the project process, the resources like people, equipment, and money. We have to be very clear about the output that the project is going to create, and we need to understand and be committed to the outcome, that future state that we want to reach. We have to act project. A project is about energy, motivation, people cooperating. It's about people setting goals and focusing on achieving those goals. People need to be innovators, problem solvers, and happy to use their initiative. We have to drive a project. Operations have enough momentum to keep on running and running, even if the managers are not there. But a project needs constant adjustments, measuring, monitoring, planning, and replanning to make sure that it keeps pushing towards the output that was promised. And we have to learn project. As we do each project, we must continually reflect on what's gone well and what hasn't. We must look for areas where we can improve in all facets of the project, how it's planned, how it's managed, how the work is created and delivered. We need to embed those improvements so that when we do the next project, we are going to do it just a little bit better because we are constantly developing better ways to do projects.